When people have asked me this question before, I always say, well, it really goes back to the first voices I ever heard growing up, and that voice was absolutely Judy Garland, Wizard of Oz being the first of many movie musicals and then albums that I listened to with Judy. And so, yeah, when I was about 6 years old, my mom in Rockland County, New York, made me aware that there was this young troupe, like a traveling summer theater with performances, performed for kids by kids. And you had to be 7 to audition. So I remember counting down, like, okay, I'm 7, I can audition. And the production was The Wizard of Oz. And I, of course, wanted to play Dorothy, but, I was 7, so the odds of that were greatly against me. I tell this story in some of my concerts, I also had my front teeth missing, so I had a strong lisp. But I didn't let this stop me. I got up at the audition and I sang my best rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The story goes that they tried to kind of cut me off after a reasonable amount, I'm sure over 32 bars or something. But I was just fixated because I'd always wanted to audition and sing in public. And I just kept going, and they let me do the whole song. And so the reason I'm babbling about this is they decided to write in that at the end of the show, as Dorothy was clicking her heels and going back to Kansas, that a little munchkin would come out and sing a reprise of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And that little munchkin was me. So I say they created a monster. I got to sing my favorite song as a solo in my very first show ever, which was The Wizard of Oz. Ever since then, I just wanted to be on the stage. I love singing in itself, and I love acting in itself, but musical theater has always been my first love. And singing in my own voice before impressions of people like Judy, but it all started with The Wizard of Oz, truly.
Do you remember the first time, maybe as a 6 or 7 year old, walking down Broadway, looking at the big lights and thinking, one day I really want to be on one of those stages?
I do, and as hysterical as it is, it's always topical. I'm not forcing it. The first Broadway musical I ever saw was Cats, so another Weber piece. I remember just being so excited to finally go to a Broadway show and be old enough that my parents trusted me to sit through a Broadway show as a precocious child. And it's that thrilling moment when you hear that orchestra and you see those people come out on the stage. You are transported, I'm still sitting there with my parents, but I was totally transported. And afterwards, I did think, oh my gosh, should I wait for them at the stage door? Will I recognize them? No, I don't want to do that. I was always that person who was embarrassed to go to the stage door. But that thrill never left me. And growing up and then being in theater, and then going to school in New York City, and being in shows in New York City, it never gets old. And then I'll never forget the day someone was waiting for me at a stage door. Yeah. It's just that, it's that amazing full circle feeling, and that part of it is just so great. And I'm really lucky that I grew up in so close to New York City, and then living in New York City, where that was always at my fingertips, and I do not take that for granted.
I've got to ask you about the impressions. When did they all begin? Because they are just so incredible.
Thank you. They began very naturally as a kid, as you could tell from my previous story, always singing out, always eager to jump in. And so I remember my mom saying to me, Christina, don't sing it like the recording, sing it like you. And I thought at the time that she just meant don't sing it with their phrasing, their expression, don't imitate them. But I didn't know she meant don't impersonate them. Do not try to sound like them, because I did it very naturally. When I'd sing along to a Dolly Parton song, I would take on a lighter tone. When I would sing along to Patti LuPone and Evita, I would sing wider and louder and brassy. And so I had a natural ear for mimicry, and it wasn't until I got a bit older when I realized that I could kind of change my voice to sound like other people, that maybe it might be an asset, maybe if they needed someone to play a kid in a show, or an old lady, or in voiceover world, doing funny voices or voice matching or stuff like that. But I never thought, oh yes, I will make a career out of impersonating people, because the only impressionists I really saw ever in the mainstream were comedians who did impressions as a part of their comedy set. And I'm not a stand-up comic. And even today, I've played lots of comedy clubs and festivals, but I'm not a stand-up comedian. I'm a performer that happens to do some funny bits that can fit that mold. So really, for me, it all comes back to the show Forbidden Broadway, the long-running off-Broadway show, and it was played here at the Meunier Chocolate Factory and in the West End, and I was lucky enough to be in those. Forbidden Broadway, for people that don't know, spoofs and parodies all of the Broadway shows and West End shows and their stars. And it changes with every changing season. So it goes back to The Sound of Music and Les Mis and to contemporary shows, today, like Wicked and Jersey Boys and, even more modern ones. And the great thing is, when you're in that show, there are usually 2 men and 2 women, typically, that sort of inhabit every single role on Broadway past and present. And they say in the audition notice, like impression's a plus. And when I say audition notice, the show is running about 28 years before I even joined the production. They didn't have auditions. They had a huge stable of people. So I grew up listening to these cast albums and essentially singing along, impersonating the impersonators, impersonating the impressionists. I don't like to say impersonators, I say impressionists, because impersonators means you kind of get dressed up as the people and all that. But it was great because when I finally saw an audition in Backstage magazine, like an open call for actors, if you're an Actors Equity Union, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're having an audition, I must go. And I went, oh, this is going to take a lot of work. And I thought, wait a minute, you have been preparing for this audition for essentially, 25 years. Yeah. So from when I was born. So I went to the audition, just an open call. They said they were looking for potential future replacements, which technically means they're not looking. They're required to have this call. So my hopes weren't high that it would lead to anything. Mm-hmm. And I remember I locked myself in my room and I was like doing Bernadette Peters. I'm doing Patti LuPone and Barbara Streisand and Kristen Chenoweth. And I went, okay, I think I can do these voices. And I called my mom and I said, does this sound like Bernadette Peters to you? And she went, yeah. And I went, what do you mean, yeah? She goes, well, you always did that. I mean, it was more apparent to my mother that I was going to be good at impressions than it was to me because I'd never utilized them. I auditioned, this is the short version, I auditioned, they called me back again, and all of a sudden I was offered the role in New York, and almost overnight I was reviewed in the New York Times as this great impressionist, and I was like, whoa, what now? What? So I took it seriously, but I took it seriously as of 2008. So that's how long I've really been doing impressions.
I mean, you've managed to not be pigeonholed, though, which is great, isn't it? Because, the entertainment business loves to put you into a pigeonhole, and you are an impressionist, stick the label on you, but you've been able to do so many different things. You are the original little voice, really, aren't you?
Yeah, well, thank you. You hit it on the head there, because as soon as I started to get known for impressions, even in New York, I thought, okay, I've got to balance this out. And then I was very fortunate to get a lot of attention on YouTube for doing impressions, which, according to the algorithms and the YouTube powers that be, I'm the one that started the trend, because I'm not the first person to do impressions by any means, let alone in that manner, taking one song and having people that haven't done it sing it before. I mean, I think one of the first people that did that was Sammy Davis Jr. I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but I was the first person to do it on YouTube that got media attention.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview. If you enjoyed it, please click on the like button and ring that notification bell. And there are many, many more to listen to on this channel, so make sure you subscribe if you possibly can. Thank you.